Hello and welcome to Heritage Talk on the Heritage Supporters Group on YouTube. I'm trying something new this time, and I've got my good friend from back in the day from UKIP. That is Adnan. Hello, Adnan.
Hello. How you doing?
We have a bit of a history of being involved in politics and movements like liberalists and stuff like that.
Yep.
Um, Obviously, the country is in a complete state. I think that's obvious.
Bit of an
Would you
understatement.
agree with that?
Definitely. I mean, it could be worse. We could be Scotland.
Well, that's true. Yeah. um, I guess for me, like the biggest things which have stood out in recent times, obviously you've got the Meghan Markle thing happening at the moment, which is a big controversy. We've had Piers Morgan fired because of that for defending the royal family.
Yeah.
You know, and we had the big thing with the statues getting pulled down. Edward Colston in Bristol.
Yeah.
Obviously, you had loads of things going on in America as well, over the pond to do with that. At the time, you also had things like faulty towers getting removed from TV and all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, why has this gone into
Which
hype?
also, to the point, the Muppets also now has a content warning on Disney.
Yes, and I actually watched Aladdin recently on Disney Plus just because I had Disney Plus. I thought I'd revisit the old classics, and it gave me a warning message at the start saying this contains negative stereotypes.
Jesus. Yeah, that's probably just for Robin Williams' bit.
Oh,
constant impressions.
Oh yeah, of course. You can't do impressions now. That must be the latest one.
God forbid.
Yeah. So what?
I think the Meghan Markle thing and the statues are quite closely related because what it's doing is trying to apply American race relations to the UK, and they're vastly different.
Yeah, well, we haven't had the history of slavery and things like that. Obviously, we have way back in the day, but we were the first to abolish it, and we haven't had
we
things
went around the globe we continued going around the globe. We'd already been there a lot of the time, but we went out of our way to try and abolish it in other countries as well.
Yeah, and we went into debt just to do that, didn't we?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I believe that only got paid off in the early 2000s.
Yeah. It's incredible.
But I think this is one of the things with Meghan. She is assuming that it's race related and she's trying to project, like I say, American race relations to the UK and thinking that's how it works over here as well. And it just isn't.
No, but this is all, whether it's the left in America or Britain or elsewhere, ultimately it's about destroying our culture and identity and replacing it with this sort of globalist, multicultural ideology. And it just so happens over here that we have a royal family, and so they're the natural target. And Meghan Markle's found a great niche by managing to marry into it and then slag us off within a few months.
I mean, she's come from the Hollywood liberal elite as such, where you can say pretty much whatever you want as long as it's left wing. Whereas the royals have to be very particular about what they say. They can't make comments because their words have that much more impact. You know, at the end of the day, does it really matter what people in Hollywood say on Twitter or the comments they give as such? Pride's an underlying movement, but if the Queen says something, then that can cause an international incident.
Well, it's basically nearly all celebrities at the moment seem to be left wing, and you can say anything outrageous as long as it's of a left wing nature.
Yeah.
And so they don't pay a cost in any way, but you absolutely pay a cost if you say anything remotely conservative. That's just what's happened in the last few years.
There's definitely issue. You know, the thing with the Brit Awards at the moment as well, that there's not enough women being picked as directors and so forth, nominated for these awards. Well, maybe we should just nominate who's best for it, regardless. Doesn't seem like that dumb of an idea to me. And, maybe last year no women got represented for awards because they weren't that good. I swear to God, if Wonder Woman 1984 wins a bloody award just because Patty Jenkins directed and wrote it, it's a pile of trash.
I don't even know who Patty Jenkins is.
There we go. She directed both the Wonder Woman films. First one, decent. She's a semi-decent director. Evidently a terrible screenwriter, but each of their own strengths.
I remember when the Oscars were, I think it was either last year or the year before, Moonlight was one of the films. And it was in the same year that La La Land was released.
Right.
And I went to see both films. And the film Moonlight for me was just total garbage. It was just about a black man in a homosexual relationship. And the whole film was like, can you believe this? He's black and he's gay and he's having a hard time and society is terrible. And that was the whole film, basically.
Someone's made a good point in the comments, by the way. Wonder Woman 1984 literally has Wonder Woman rape someone.
I haven't seen that. I might see it now.
From the First World War comes back in someone else's body and then she sleeps with him, or it's implied she does.
Surely that's every man's fantasy.
Moral quandary, right?
Surely that's every man's fantasy, getting raped by Wonder Woman.
Touche, but imagine if the roles had been reversed.
True.
And I guarantee people would kick off about that, the implications of that. But go figure.
Well, that's what the whole thing that Sargon of Akkad and a few others have been speaking about, identifying as super straight, and flipping it on its head.
There's, I think this whole identitarian thing has really, you can see it in the way the BBC handles anything, for example, especially their handling of ancient history. And I'm gonna obviously bring things back to history a lot because that is something I know a lot about. But there was a few last year, I think it was, it might have been the year before, there was their depiction of a stereotypical Roman centurion family in Britain. And the Roman centurion was black, and it's like, no, that's not to say there weren't black legionaries. There certainly were, but there weren't that many sub-Saharan Africans in Britain. In the same way, the BBC and Netflix did an adaptation of the Iliad, and this one really grinds my gear because
go on.
They made Achilles, who is described in the Iliad as having blonde hair, long flowing blonde hair. The Greek word they use is xanthi, which can be translated as anything from auburn to blonde. And in this context, generally translated to mean yellow and blondish hair. And they cast him as a bald sub-Saharan African man. And the bit that annoys me more is in the Iliad and the whole Trojan cycle, there is a character that is a sub-Saharan African man that is described as the equal of Achilles in fighting skill, Memnon. Why not just put him in it?
Yeah, because he didn't have a a heroic figure in that film. He was
one of the heroes of Troy. But why? When they're changing these sort of things, the Anne Boleyn now being black in that adaptation.
Yeah.
Now, why try appropriating, but changing Western history compared to, say, doing a story about the Maori Empire? Or how about this? The prelude to the Zulu War from the perspective of the Zulus, because King Ketchwayo taking over the whole region is a fascinating story. Also, someone made comment again about pharaohs being of Western European heritage. Varies, especially the period of the Hyksos, which is believed to be a Levantine invasion of northern Egypt. But it's a bit mixed. Certainly, they weren't sub-Saharan African, though. There was a definite mix. Black Panther starring blackface Robert Downey Jr. Best.
But isn't that the point, that they're trying to sort of multiculturalize our culture, but also our history? Because, like you say, if otherwise, they would have done things to do with.
Do it all the time, because if there's anything about slavery, they never mention any of the white slaves who were brought over, because there were quite a few. There's a reason that African American vernacular English has a certain accent and twang to it, because a lot of it is derived from Welsh and Cornish and Scottish, because there were a lot of Welsh, Cornish, and Scottish slaves. And those accents held true.
Wasn't there a book written about that called something like Black Redneck and White
I'm not sure. Not sure.
I've heard Gavin McInnes talk about it before. It's like one of his favourite authors. Anyway, that's
Black
besides the
Rednecks and
point.
White Liberals.
White Liberals, right? That's it. Yeah.
6 essays by Thomas Sowell. I shall have to have a look at that.
Good old Thomas Sowell. An interesting aspect of the Meghan Markle controversy, because I read into it. One of the key claims she makes is that they didn't offer Archie, her son, to be a prince. And she said that this could perhaps be because of his race, because he's not 100% white, obviously, because that's the obvious conclusion for her.
Yeah.
But I looked into this, and I don't know too much about royal protocols and things like that. But I looked on Town and Country magazine, and basically the protocol is for the eldest son of the monarch to become a prince. It's not for every great grandson and every cousin to become prince. It's only certain people, and Archie would become prince when Prince Charles becomes king, but until that point he is not a prince, and that is the royal protocol. So her saying that this is the protocol is for her son to become prince is just bollocks.
Yeah, in the same way that Princess Anne's grandchildren aren't princes.
Right.
Because that's not how the royal titles work.
No. And you'd think she'd look this, well, I don't know if she knows this.
Well, no, because as she said, she didn't bother to research. She didn't bother to... She felt that it was unfair on her that she had to look up the lyrics of the national anthem on her own, and that someone didn't tell it to her. And this was, hang on, what did you expect to be given a script? I know you're an actress, but come on.
Yeah. I think we need to remind ourselves that she did once post, I think on Instagram years ago, one of Noam Chomsky's books. And I think that kind of sums her up, really. She's a Chomskyite.
Chomsky
Hollywood
is an interesting character in himself because he's a very, very good linguist. And if you separate his work as a linguist from his politics, which he does as well, then he's definitely worth a read because his stuff in the field of linguistics is really spot on, really interesting.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I'm sure Karl Marx was a smart, interesting person as well. It's just
good point.
It's all in context, isn't it?
Exactly.
But what did you make of Piers Morgan's defence of the royal family? And did you watch any of the videos on Good Morning Britain?
Yes, yeah. I've not seen.
They're really entertaining.
Actually, I've not got around to watching that one. But I agree with him sticking by his guns on it as well. And I've heard the quote he said where he doesn't believe a word of it. I get where it's coming from. I agree. And I think the reason people got kicked off about that, especially ITV doing it as well, was because of when he said it. Because he said it pretty much directly after Meghan said about her mental health and suicide and stuff. And ITV has a bad history with that sort of thing. You know, you've got the guy from Jeremy Kyle, 2 contestants on Love Island, and and what's her name? Be Kind.
Oh, Caroline Flack. Right.
You know, that they've had a string of people that have committed suicide. It's a very touchy subject for ITV, and I think that might be why they had such a strong reaction to it. And Piers actually evidently said, he did say afterwards, that, you know, he can't see inside her head, he can't speak about the mental health bit. He wasn't talking about that. He said, you know, he doesn't believe what she's saying. And that's a fair enough thing to say.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, we live in this society of just believe victims, and I don't buy that 1 second.
Well, because it includes.
I want to clarify that, by the way, because I guarantee that's going to be soundbited. The believe victims thing is believe victims with evidence. Give them benefit of the doubt and to them provide evidence. Certainly, but you don't just believe them outright. We're innocent until proven guilty in Western society.
Well, this is what the left argues now. Innocent. Well,
innocent until accused,
and believe no matter what. That's basically what they believe.
Innocent until accused, unless you're Joe Biden.
Yeah. And just because the issue involves a person who's not white and talking about mental health, that means that she's absolutely correct straight away. No need to search any more into this, you know. But the funny thing is, the public are overwhelmingly against Meghan Markle. It seems to be
in the UK,
in
America,
yeah.
it's the complete opposite.
In America,
yeah,
and that's not just, you know, the sort of crazy lefty part of America. You're saying across
there's a stronger consensus in favour of America. Well, in fact, Americans generally tend to be quite anti-royal as much as they like watching it all. And
they're obsessed by it, aren't they?
Yeah, but at the same point, any accusation of racism against them, yeah, they're going to say, "Oh, definitely they're racist." You know, they're not, and also that they don't have as much they don't have the national pride about the royal family that we do. But at the same point, if someone said that about the Constitution, for example, I think people might be a bit more questioning in America. Yeah,
well, that's their heritage.
Yeah, but as to Piers Morgan walking off and so forth, I think I can understand why he did it. He said he needed to cool off a bit because he got frustrated, which is perfectly reasonable. Not necessarily the best look if you're being a live TV host, but
he said he didn't want to get trashed on his own show, which to an extent I can understand.
Yeah, at the same
especially by the weatherman. That's pretty insulting.
yeah, that's good. He's going from strength to strength now anyway, isn't it? Piers is not going to be. He's not going to be cancelled. It's Piers Morgan. You don't cancel Piers Morgan.
He cancels you.
He's going to Andrew Neil's GB News, isn't he? I believe.
Well, I've heard speculation. I've also heard something about Channel 5, but I think it's all speculation at this point. I don't really know.
Well, ITV have lost I think they were down 23% or something, or down to 23% viewing figures after Piers left. Bear in mind they went to 49 on his last day.
Right. Wow.
They've lost a massive. Their stock price has dropped as well.
Brilliant. That's what I want to see. It was quite ironic because that was the first time they got higher viewing figures than BBC. Yeah. It's funny because I've always hated Piers Morgan. Everything from, supporting vaccine passports and all this kind of thing, and how self-righteous he is. But the way he acted in that whole scandal, I was totally behind him in every way. Every argument he made was on point. He didn't get angry. He didn't get flustered. He said it all perfectly.
I think Piers he's a very, very clever man. He's very good at marketing. And that's what he's doing with everything there. Because the amount of people that know him have said he's very different off camera. And I'm inclined to believe that. He seems like he's doing a lot of things because he knows that's what his audience wants to hear and wants to see. And no matter whether you like or dislike Piers Morgan, you watched because his opinion was interesting. What he did was interesting to watch.
Yeah.
And he's not. I don't think he's necessarily as opinionated as people necessarily think he is. I think he might be a lot more reasonable to discussion when he's not on TV. Which I think, that's fair enough. He's a presenter. He's a journalist and presenter at the end of the day. He's trying to get a viewing, which is working. And he's got good value. He's not going to go anywhere.
Well, I think GB News would be mad not to try and hire him because they need some good publicity, and someone like him would bring a lot of viewers to the show for sure.
Yeah. I would love to see a Piers Morgan and why is my mind blanking on his name? American, everyone knows him. Got cancelled.
American, everyone knows him. Got cancelled. That's still
Alex Jones.
Alex.
Yeah, Morgan and Alex Jones co-hosting a series. Fuck it, get them co-hosting Top Gear. I'd watch that.
Yeah, I would watch that as well. Yeah.
We've got people asking us to talk about the vaccine and jabs.
Okay, what do we want to talk about that? Because I'm dead against the vaccine passports. That's my major issue.
We've got questions. I'm saying, are the Heritage Party against jabs? Now, point out I'm not a member of the Heritage Party, not yet anyway. Definitely looked into it, but at the moment I'm staying partyless for the time being. But I believe you're a member now, aren't you?
I'm a member now. I've only been a member for a few days, but I've been doing my research and I've liked the Heritage Facebook group, etc. And I can confirm that David Curtin, at least, is against vaccine passports, which I'm very pleased to hear.
Okay. I think fair to say I'm against vaccine passports as well. I think the idea is patently ridiculous. At the same point, we make arguments that there are vaccine passports for other things, admittedly, though they are much more deadly things.
You mean like malaria shots and things like that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which, again, so I can see the logic of why some people want to think it's worth introducing. Still don't think it is, because the death rate of COVID is negligible. That don't want to sound callous with that.
If you're under the age of 75, you're at pretty damn limited risk, basically, of dying at least.
Exactly. So, but as to the question was, are the Heritage Party against the jabs, as in the jabs in general?
The answer to that is no. They're not against the jabs, just the forced coercion, basically.
Yeah, I mean, I speaking for myself here, obviously, I don't intend to have it. I just don't see it's worthwhile for me to have it. I'm in the age bracket that has such a minimal amount of chance of dying of it. It's not really worth me having it. I'm more likely to die of the flu than I am of COVID. But my girlfriend has had it. She works in a care home. Makes sense for her to.
Right.
So I get, if people want to have it, fair enough. I don't think there should be this forced coercion to do so.
Your girlfriend did your girlfriend at all say to you, you know what, Adnan, you should really take that vaccine?
No.
No?
She wants me to get a flu jab, just because if that spreads to her, it can be quite bad. But other than that.
Yeah. It's funny, my girlfriend's Mexican, and they're Catholics, and her parents it's funny, like my world of knowing all this stuff from conservative online world actually crosses over with my Mexican girlfriend's parents, and they're against the vaccine, and they've seen things on the internet where they think that it's unethical and it's not properly tested and things like that. And it's just funny that I have such things in common with someone so far away.
I think, based on the conversation that's going on in the comments, at least, I think the question was more aimed about the safety of the vaccines, which is an interesting one because they've not been rushed. They've done all different stages of trials at the same time. However, they're not all fully completed yet. At the same point, they've reached an efficacy rate where they said, okay, that is reasonable. I know I'm not no medical professional. I don't know enough data on that sort of thing. But ultimately, the trials haven't actually been completed. Is it fair to say we can't actually do an efficacy test and a test on the long-term effects of the vaccine, even if it's very unlikely that there are going to be any, because you know what's going into the vaccine, and you know how it works, so you know what you expect the long-term results to be. But if you don't do that testing, we have to do that testing, I think, regardless. That's just a matter of basic scientific principle. Even if we expect within 99% certainty that we know what it's going to cause, even as possible side effects, we need to have long-term testing to be sure of that. Unexpected things can happen.
Yeah, I mean, it's so funny because so many people have gone straight on the line of, oh, this is a foolproof tested vaccine. If you don't believe in it, you're a conspiracy theorist. I've been following what people like Dr. Mike Eden have been saying, who has been banned from everything now. They won't let him speak at all. And from what I understand, when a vaccine comes out, it goes through 3 stages of trials in order to be approved. and most of these vaccines, or nearly all of them, I think, have gone through stage 1 trials. And it's only because we have emergency legislation in place in Britain and America and other countries that this vaccine has allowed to go through on only stage 1 trials.
I'm not sure if that's. I don't. From what I understand, they've done multiple stages of trials just at the same time.
Right. Okay. But basically this vaccine hasn't gone through the full procedure as a normal vaccine would.
Yeah, because the thing is, once the trial's concluded, you still need to have peer review and so forth.
Mm.
You know, it's normally before, even after the trial's ended. It's if I'm right about this, which I might be wrong, but it's normally, I believe, at least a year or so before it even gets published in medical journals.
Right.
You know, so things take time for analysis.
Yeah. I've got a comment here saying French-Israeli doctors have said that under 65s have a 260% higher risk of dying of a jab than they have of catching COVID and dying from that. Well, that's interesting. I don't know what the source is for that, but
Yeah.
it wouldn't surprise me if that's true.
It's again, I'm no medical professional, so I can't really say as such. Based on what I understand of how it works, I can't see why there would be complications and so forth, but I don't know. Ultimately, I can't. I think that's something that a lot of people don't do, especially on Twitter. You know, it's not represented the world, obviously, but people aren't willing to say, look, ultimately, there's not enough information for me to say either way. A lot of people aren't. It's not a case of wrong or right. It's a case of we don't know. I don't know. Let's look into it.
So what happens then if your girlfriend says to you, hey, I really want to go to Greece this year, and then you find out you can't go to Greece unless you have this vaccine passport? Will you then take the vaccine?
Probably not. I mean, it depends. Honestly, I'd have a conversation with her about it. It's like, well, can we go somewhere else instead? If not, well, I don't, unless I see data of seeing there being significant risk towards me at taking it, and it's being offered free, I would consider it. I'm not opposed. I'm not I'll never have it. At the same point, I'm not give it to me right now. It's one of those, I just don't see the necessity in having it right now. If vaccine passports did come in, then I would definitely consider it more. Especially Greece as well, because I've got a couple of friends out in Greece, and I'd like to still be able to go and see them.
I've been to Athens. I love Athens.
Thessaloniki is my place.
Okay, never been.
Second largest city in Greece, on the mainland, opposite end of Greece, northern end. Beautiful city. Everything's on like a 60-degree hill, so very steep, very good workout. Just walking to the bathroom.
I think I probably wouldn't take the vaccine, even if it meant I wouldn't be able to travel abroad, because for me, it's a point of principle that I don't want to be coerced into taking this, for me, unfully tested vaccine. So that's where I'd stand on that issue.
I get that. It's one of those, I would prefer not to take it if possible. I'd rather just say, okay, I'll go somewhere else that doesn't require me to have it.
I was pleased to see that Elon Musk even said that he isn't taking the vaccine because he doesn't need to.
I understand vaccinating the vulnerable, but when we're saying, everyone needs to be vaccinated, no, that's patently absurd.
Yeah,
because also it's been claimed multiple times by multiple sources, government sources as well, that the vaccine doesn't prevent catching it or transmitting it. It just effectively prevents the symptoms of it and prevents your body having a reaction to it.
Well, it gives you
catch it, and you can still spread it.
It gives you a much less worse version of coronavirus, so that your body is prepared for it next time. That's basically how viruses work, isn't it?
Kind of, yeah. That's a very, very loose version of it, but yes. Well, what I believe it is, it's an mRNA vaccine. Takes certain strands of the RNA and attach, because when a virus attacks your body doesn't recognize it. With new viruses, it doesn't know how to fight it. That's why COVID is quite can be quite dangerous to certain people because your body doesn't know how to fight it, and that leaves your immune system vulnerable to other things. What this does is it attaches some RNA from COVID or whatever virus it is designed as a vaccine against, and attaches it to something your body does know how to fight. So when it sees it next, it will recognize it, it will tie it to some, it will think, okay, that comes along with the thing I need to fight, I'll fight it. Pretty much. But yeah. Can we ignore the fact that we wouldn't be in this mess if Boris terminated international travel back in January 2020? Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
As Jeff Norcott, very good comedian, Jeff Norcott has said, people ask me, do I regret voting for a Conservative government? I say, no, I regret not getting one.
Yeah. Yeah. What have you made of the lockdowns? I'm sure you're very in support of them.
Well, I've lost 2 jobs out of it, so that was great. And
I was actually working for Amazon in the first lockdown because that's the only place I could get a job at the time. The second time round, I managed to get universal credit, which I can't really complain, sitting at home, earning money for doing nothing. But at the same time, it's not how you want to run a society.
I was on furlough for like 9 months, and good Lord, does it kill your brain.
But sure, I thought you'd like that because you're quite a person who likes to read a lot of books and things like that.
Yeah, for the first couple of weeks, it's all right. But at the same point, I've always, whenever I go like to read a book, I used to go to the pub and sit and read it because I actually enjoy sitting around people and reading more than I do just sitting on my own reading. It's a sociable thing. My entire career before the lockdowns was hospitality. And now the hospitality industry is screwed. 5% of pubs in the UK shut last year.
Well, your family owns a pub, don't they?
Yeah. My parents own a pub. They've not been able to open. Well, they were able to open for a couple of months at best. But even, my father's not really worried because he owns the place. So he's not really got many overheads. So he can stomach it. But it's estimated within the next 5 years, about 75% of pubs in the UK are going to be shut. And this is a big part of British culture. Yeah, 75%. Now, it's such a big part of British culture that in the Second World War, Churchill didn't shut the pubs. They're so important for British morale.
It's funny because
to just go to the pub and see someone.
Oh, it's a massive part of our society. And it's funny, I've been trying to learn more about financial markets and the stock market and things like that, just out of interest. I'm not investing large sums or anything. But things like Wetherspoons are actually, their stock has gone sky high because people think Wetherspoons is such a big brand and part of British life now. So people still believe in the pubs, but obviously because they've been so hammered, it's going to be difficult.
Yeah, but ultimately, it's not sustainable. Sacha Lord, I believe, I think that he's the guy who's doing it, is leading a court case against the government for lockdowns. Let me just find it, just to double check. Sacha Lord, he's nighttime economy advisor for Greater Manchester, apparently.
Right,
He's got a legal challenge on the restrictions for hospitality to try and get hospitality to be able to open at the same time as non-essential retail without restrictions, they've already got rid of the restriction to require a meal. They've already got rid of, I think there's another restriction, I can't remember what it is, but they've got rid of a couple of them already. So it's actually going somewhere, and I can see that actually going through and the court supporting
that. We've been let down so many times, though, by lawsuits against the government. Do you really see the courts overruling the government on something like that?
Because this one it's not saying open everything now, it's saying open at the same time as non-essential retail. We're still with social distancing in place, and bear in mind, hospitality spent so much making everything COVID compliant, only to be shut down a month or two later. And you can't do this when pubs were shut straight away because they were shut on a night's notice, which is absolutely absurd. The bar I was working at, we had had a delivery of beer literally the day before. Now, if it was, which at the time was 2 weeks to save the NHS, yeah, most beers will last 2 weeks if unopened. I mean, they shouldn't, but it'd be enough for most of them. But a year later, how much beer? You got to chuck a lot of beer away.
Oh yeah, I read a news article about how much beer was thrown away, and it was a massive amount, wasn't it?
And now, in this lockdown, pubs have been banned from selling takeaway beers, which I see no logic to that one. Because in the previous lockdowns, that was fine. And it allowed a lot of smaller pubs to have that little bit of revenue turning over.
Do you believe at all in the idea that any of this could be manufactured, whether it be from, the Klaus Schwab types and people like that? Or do you think this is purely coincidental that the whole world has gone quite authoritarian in its reaction?
I believe it's intentional. I think I understand why people like to think that. Because it's a lot more comforting to think that there is this coordinated effort to make things authoritarian, to do things like this, than it is to think that everyone is just bloody incompetent.
That tends to be what I think as well, to be honest.
This is what I think it is. Generally, I think everyone is just that incompetent, running it a bit scared and confused, and doesn't really know what they're planning to do. There's plenty. There is some of it that's intentional. I certainly think. Was it Churchill who said, "Never let a good crisis go to waste"?
Churchill.
Someone said that. I don't know why my mind thinks it's Churchill. Yeah,
we need to clarify that. Adnan, look that up.
Yeah,
I'm like Joe Rogan.
I believe
I've heard that quote so many times.
It's
He did say it. It was Churchill in World War II, apparently.
It's speculation he said it in a meeting with Stalin and Roosevelt that first brought up the formation of the United Nations. But there's no actual confirmation other than it sounds like something Churchill would say.
There's a lot of confusion around Churchill, though, because there's another famous quote which says that the real fascists of the future will call themselves the anti-fascists. But it turns out that he didn't actually say that at all, from what I've read. And I don't know where that quote comes from, but I've heard it crop up from various people.
I mean, my favourite Churchill quote was when he was quite drunk, and one of the noble ladies, such characters, said, "You, sir, are drunk." He said, "And you, ma'am, are ugly. But in the morning, I shall be sober, and you shall still be ugly."
Yeah.
Which,
So let's talk about an American.
The quote, someone saying.
Sorry. Which one? The quote about who said no crisis should go to waste.
Not sure.
Well, someone look that up, and we'll state that. Look that up and tell us in the comments, and we'll announce that.
The fascists quote, apparently.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, some of the people have started writing quotes and deciding what name to put to it. People should get called out for doing that, as famously said by Abraham Lincoln.
Okay, so I've put Heritage Party in the title of this video, so I feel like we should spend some time talking about the Heritage Party.
Yep. Probably a good idea.
I'll do a brief summary of why I decided to join. I think some people might criticize me because I've sort of bounced around parties recently, which I understand. But
I can understand people questioning your commitment as such and jumping shit.
But I have bounced around as such for noble reasons, I would say, in my opinion.
I mean, I was one of the ones criticizing when you jumped ship to the Conservatives. So,
well, okay.
I can understand jumping ship from UKIP. Don't worry, that was a sinking ship.
Okay, well, UKIP number one. the NEC and the leadership totally went against its members and banned members, people running, everything. They basically turned into complete fascists, as far as I'm concerned.
It's organised mess, to say the least.
Yeah, so that was a disaster. And then I thought, well, I'll join the Conservatives. We've got Boris Johnson become leader, and we've got Dominic Cummings, who's an arch Brexiteer. So maybe this is a chance for us to change the Conservative Party and make it more in our image. However, that was obviously a cursed attempt, because as soon as that happened, a few months later, Boris Johnson introduced the most totalitarian lockdowns I've ever seen, and just basically said goodbye to liberty. And it turns out that he wasn't very conservative at all. He was actually much more libertarian.
I think Boris has always been libertarian.
Well, that is true.
If anything, he's shown the complete opposite in the past year. And I think that was always been after he got COVID himself. I think that sort of scared him.
That is true, but he has been patriotic in the past, and so I would be quite happy if he was sort of like a patriotic libertarian type.
Yeah, libertarianism and patriotism are nothing. They're not exclusive. I would not see them as anyway.
No, but I tend to have more faith in libertarians that are more patriotically minded, and that makes me think that they're going to stick up for the country a bit more, which I saw in Boris.
The state that is there should be quite strong.
Sorry, what was that?
I said, I as someone could reasonably be described as libertarian a lot of the time, I would say that I want a minimal state, but the minimal bit that's there should be very strong. Not as in strong reaching, but should be stable and strong and able to act proportionally and necessarily when it needs to, but it shouldn't do so often.
And I was also pissed off because it seems like he fired Dominic Cummings, who he was a key component in my trust in him. And he started taking a lot of direction from Carrie Simmons, who, as far as I can tell, is the worst kind of liberal, greeny, socialist type fake conservative that you could possibly get. And I can't be happy in a party which goes along those lines of...
I think you were a little bit naive and optimistic and you thought the Conservative Party was going to reform.
I have to say, a large part of my hope was the fact that they had Dominic Cummings playing such a big role. I wouldn't say Dominic...
Best, we can hope for a split in the Conservative Party.
I wouldn't say
Dominic... We're likely to see the same in Labour. And I can see that certainly happening. And possibly we're going to a maybe 3 or 4 party system in the next few years.
Well... I mean, the 2-party system has survived for a long time. I mean,
we were a 3-party system until Nick Clegg.
Yes. Yeah. He was sort of seen as the person who would break that 2-party system, but that
obviously so much potential to do so.
Yeah. But Nick Clegg obviously wasn't the one to do that.
Yeah.
So anyway, Conservatives went to pot, which wasn't great. And to me, that left the obvious opposition to the Conservatives, which was Nigel Farage. He has always been the most effective challenger to the Conservatives when it comes to the issues I care about, lower immigration, free speech, low taxes, etc. But recently, he's decided to step down as leader and hand over the reins to Richard Tice, who for me is very much just a corporate libertarian, big business type. I don't think he has much to say about social conservatism whatsoever. He just wants basically what the Conservative Party should be, which is a more libertarian type capitalist party. That's kind of how they think the Conservative Party should be, but isn't. I want a more social conservative party. So for me, Richard Tice is never going to cut it, because I don't believe he believes in proper... I don't think he gives too much of a flying damn about our Christian heritage and things like that, for instance.
I mean, I've had issues with Farage ever since he left UKIP. Frankly,
Yeah.
I think he's a bit of an opportunist. Now, I fully respect the work he's done over the past 40 years. He's done a lot of work for this country. He's done a lot of good work for this country. But at the same point, I think he's more interested in preserving him and continuing as a figure rather than carrying a party or enacting actual massive change. He's done his fair bit in Venice. If he wants to just step back a bit, I think he's done a good amount that he can say, no, I've done well so far. Unfortunately, it's coming across now that he's egoistic opportunist at times. Even if I still agree with him on a lot of things, he seems to be very centered on making sure he has the attention. UKIP was him until Batten actually brought the party out of the cult of personality. But then that caused the cult of personality a bit for Batten as well. I think Farage, he's good as a figure, not as a political agent, perhaps is about the best term.
Well, I don't actually believe he's that egoistic, but I do kind of feel like he is basically the voice of big business. And there's nothing wrong with that because, well, there is some things that have wrong with that. Big business is probably better than what we have now, because what we have now is totalitarianism. Big business is basically as little state control as possible.
Well, Farage made his money up in the city, didn't he?
As a metals trader.
Yeah, a friend of mine used to drink with him quite a bit. Obviously, haven't in the past few years, but or past year rather. But he was a trader up in the city, now works from home. But he knew Farage back in the 70s, I believe it was. Apparently, by all standards, he was just a pretty average trader. Nothing to of no such. Quite. He said he seemed a little bit egoistic at the time then. So I'm not saying that he's completely self-centered, but I think there's certainly this. He's capitalizing on the attention being on him, and he knows that he is the marketable value, not the party he's associated to.
Yeah, and that will probably reflect when we find out Reform UK doesn't actually do that well in the end, which would be my prediction.
Definitely. Which also I think in turn might be an advantage for Heritage, because Heritage, apart from David Curtin, doesn't really have that sort of big name that is carrying it on its back.
Yeah, I mean, David Curtin has a fair few followers, but he's not nearly on the level of Nigel Farage, obviously.
Yeah.
But, the Heritage Party is obviously a humble, small party at the moment. But, UKIP was the same in its early conception. So
it takes time.
So my reasoning for joining the Heritage Party was Farage has obviously dropped the ball. And I guess I'm more tempted normally to act in a practical way. What is going to attain us the goal in the easiest way? And so for me, that's what attracted me originally to the Conservatives and Reform UK. Ultimately, I just want our country to attain some sense of normality again. But now we're looking at a situation where we don't really have options as far as the big popular parties go. And so I think now it's time to give a smaller party a chance. And that's why I'm looking at the Heritage Party, because I read their manifesto months ago, and it was the best manifesto I've ever read.
I've actually got it up here. I thought it might be quite interesting for us to go through it.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do it.
So, I mean, yeah, so you said that's what's drawn you to Heritage. I when David Kern started it up, I first was quite interested in it as well. Then you got quite a lot, like Lawrence Fox's party as well. You had all these other parties springing up, but I didn't want to just jump straight in straight away. Because it was one of those, I can see it starting, and then after the mayoral elections coming up soon, I still think there's a reasonable chance the Heritage could collapse a little bit.
Well, I don't think David Curtin is going to get a substantial percentage of the vote in London, because
which is a shame, really. But
we still, let's not forget, we live in a country which is very much dominated by Labour and Conservatives. Yes. So that's not going to change very quickly. But it doesn't mean we can't make inroads. I mean, look at. I mean, I don't know if this is a good example to mention, but For Britain actually got, I think, at least a couple of councillors in the last one of the last county elections.
Wasn't it in mid 2000s the BNP got an MP?
I didn't actually know that. Maybe I've heard that before.
I'm not completely sure now. I will have to check. But I swear they did get an MP at one point.
So there is a chance for
one council seat. Let me Google it.
I should clarify, we're not supporters of the BNP, just in case anyone's wondering.
But it's a good point to make that these smaller parties can
break through
something behind them. And FS, the BNP, what led to the downfall of the BNP was free speech. It was allowing them to speak. It was allowing Nick Griffin to go on to
Question Time.
Yeah, that was it. And it showed what a fool he was. And that led to the BNP's downfall. It's still there, yeah, and it's always going to be there. You're always going to get people who are genuinely quite negative about things. But yeah.
Well, this is a funny thing. This is a theory that I've sort of come up with recently.
Yeah.
So, right-wing, conservatively minded people. We have parties that are right-wing and conservative. They tend to either go in the direction of very libertarian, in the case of parties like Reform UK and Reclaim, or they go in the other direction, which is to be more based around race and things like that, patriotic alternative. I'm not going to say For Britain are racist, because they're not racist, but they do have a lot more types who are more inclined to believe in more exclusionary politics, if you get my drift.
Yeah.
And so I think there's a middle spot, which is believing in free speech and things like that, but not being just about libertarianism, and at the same time not being racist, fascist, and, you know, wanting to rid the country of immigrants and things like that. There's some middle ground there, which I don't think is being catered to very well. I think Heritage Party is in a good position for that. I like
talking to ethno-nationalists. I find it... sorry, there we go. So the BNP got a few MEP seats, but not MP seats. Regardless, I always find talking to ethno-nationalists very interesting, because I don't always have an argument against their argument, but I still disagree with their conclusion.
There is some merit in their arguments, because...
okay, actually, we need to clarify what arguments these are as well.
Yeah.
Because if the argument is just black people are inferior, no, there's not merit to that argument.
Well, no, I was going to say that I, for instance, don't believe... Well, I wouldn't like my country to become a white minority country. But that doesn't mean that I believe that white people are superior or anything like that. It just happens that I don't want too much change too quickly, because I think it's bad for the country. But the problem with a lot of their conclusions, like you say, they would say the solution to that is to, either not have any immigrants at all or start deporting people, which I am obviously against.
Yeah. If someone is here legitimately and hardworking and wants to go and makes an effort to engage in British culture, to me, culture is defined primarily. Oh, sorry. Actually, I'm trying to think of the right way to word this. Race is, no, that's not right. Race does not define someone's nationality as much as their culture does.
Saying that though, I would say that race is a part of culture.
Oh, so
it's a small part of culture.
I think it's a much less important part of it than culture is.
Like I would say, you do have black culture. It sounds like a weird thing to say, and I've argued with someone who is black about this, Jake Faulkner, who. Oh, I probably shouldn't have said that actually, but he he would say that there's no such thing as black culture, despite being black himself.
I would agree with both of you actually. Because I think what you're trying to say with black culture is specifically talking about American black culture. Or so you got from London black culture, you've got American black culture, but then you can't say all of Africa is one culture.
No,
because it's vastly different. Similarly, I guess even with America, you can't compare black culture in Louisiana to black culture in Los Angeles. Now, I mean, there are a lot more similarities, but I'd still argue they're quite different.
I guess it's part of the fact that, in countries like America and Britain, black people identify with each other whether they're from, Ethiopia or Kenya. And so there becomes a black culture within the country. And that's where you get, like in America.
I would argue that's more colonial culture then. In that you're talking about places that Britain had colonies in. So that's what links them, is the British side of their culture rather than their culture in Africa.
Yeah, but that's what I mean. It's a new identity. It's a black culture of Britain. And so I think you can identify culture in race in some aspects, but just to re-emphasize the point, culture, like the more people on the more ethno-nationalist side, they think that culture and race is completely linked like that, which I definitely disagree with.
Yeah. I mean, as an example, the town I live in, Gravesend, I believe it's the largest Sikh community outside of India.
Right.
Large portion of the community are Sikh. And they act British. There's British come for the most part. I remember a couple of years back ago, I was getting a taxi from Gravesend, and I was talking to someone. He's been here 30 odd years, moved over from India, and he loves this country so much. He wants to be part of this country. His English was still struggling in places, but he wanted so much to be British. And he similarly, there was an Indian guy I knew used to go in a pub. Thickest East London accents you could imagine. He was a Cockney through and through, but he was Indian heritage. He was still a practicing Sikh as well. Someone asked, well, why are they still Sikhs then? So because I'm an atheist, am I not British? Would be my counter to that, because the implication from that question is that to be British, you need to be Church of England Christian.
Well, yeah, I don't believe that. As a soon-to-be Catholic, especially.
Don't get me right. Why didn't they completely give up their culture and religion and completely assimilate to the British way? Because culture, firstly, no one should ever fully give up their culture. If any of us move to somewhere else across the world, this is why you get so many expat pubs in America and everywhere. Because people want to keep a bit of their homeland with them. It's important, as it rightly should be. And this is also how culture develops and advances, by taking the best bits of other bits. Yeah, the fantastic charity work the Sikhs in Gravesend do. They've done so much over the lockdown.
Yeah, it was interesting actually when
every morning, and you can just go get a free breakfast.
Yeah, when they were having big queues at the border with France, I can't remember if it was because of COVID or Brexit, but they had the Sikh groups making and giving food to the lorry drivers, didn't they?
Yeah. Just because they can.
Yeah. Well, I have a
lot of shared values there between Sikhism and Christianity. In terms of generosity and caring for those less fortunate and so forth.
Yeah. So would you say that the difference between the people who in this country which are going to better the country is the people who have an allegiance to it and who respect our country and its values? What would you say is the dividing factor?
I think it's the desire to assimilate, the desire to become part of this country. It's not to leave their entire heritage behind, but it's to say, okay, this is still part of me, but we want to be part of this. This is. People aren't coming here because they think people are coming to Britain because they think Britain is better than where they currently are. They think it's a better opportunity for them. They evidently think society is going to treat them fair and so forth. That they wouldn't be coming here if they didn't think that. You don't go to somewhere that you think is an absolute shithole. So they're coming. People are coming here and thinking, yeah, we can make something here. We like things to be like the way things are here. And I think it's a matter of respecting the current situation, what is currently there. I couldn't necessarily define it specifically as a single thing, but I think it is respect for the nation you move into.
Another aspect of it for me, I can't remember if I've read about this in one of Mark Stein's book. He is one of the few people I actually have read quite well, and I do enjoy Mark Stein, Canadian writer. And that's the idea of a country being confident in itself and its values.
Yeah.
If a country isn't confident in itself and its values, then the immigrants coming to it won't believe in the country and its values, and they will take their values from elsewhere, such as Islamic extremists. And that's not what you want, really, obviously.
At the same point, one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter at that point. One of the best descriptions of what I think in terms of British identity, and especially with the monarchy, comes from, have you ever read the book World War Z? There was a terrible film adaptation made of it.
With Tom Cruise,
it's nothing like the book. The book is really, really good. And there's a bit said in Britain speaking about the Queen. The quote, I found it here, the quote is, "She wouldn't leave, you see. She insisted over the objections of Parliament to remain at Windsor, as she put it, for the duration. I thought maybe it was misguided nobility or maybe fear-based paralysis. I tried to make her see reason, begged her almost on my knees. What did she say? The highest of distinctions is service to others. Their task, their mandate is to personify all that is great in a national spirit. They must forever be an example to the rest of us, the strongest and the bravest, the absolute best of us." I think that really encapsulates the Queen and the royal family and what Britain tries to stand for. That's why royalty is still important in Britain.
Yes, I mean, countless polls show that the royal family is very popular despite the attacks on it. Obviously, there's a bit more anti-monarchy in the younger ages, and I know the left like to quote those polls, but perhaps that's a part of being young and rebellious. Maybe as these.
I think that ties into how people's politics change as they age. Because, again, to quote Churchill, if you are not liberal by the time you're 20, you have no heart. If you're not conservative by the time you're 30, you have no brain.
Yes. Yeah. So perhaps that these people change as they grow up. It's kind of like with the people who were young back in the day of the Sex Pistols. They were very much God Save the Queen, the fascist regime, and all that kind of thing. I saw a really funny image of who's the nature person who's on the BBC.
Neil Oliver, Scottish guy.
No, he's the English guy who's he's always on nature shows.
Bill Oddie.
No, the younger one.
Oh,
No, it's going to really annoy me, but he's always against the people who fox hunt and people like that. Anyway, he it made me laugh because he's like the most lefty type person ever, and there was a picture of him back in the day. No, sorry, in his house now with like Alan Titchmarsh. That's it. And there's a picture of him when he was in his house, and he's got like a big picture of the Sex Pistols and like something like against the Queen and everything. And it just made me laugh that this person is like a cuddly lefty, and yet he was an anti-establishment, Sex Pistols punk. It just seems like they're anti-establishment and things like that for the sake of it. It doesn't seem like these people really. I've been getting into a lot of Catholic perspective recently, and I'm a big fan of the Archbishop Fulton Sheen, who's passed away, and he was talking about the people who are ripping down the statues and people like that, saying they only know what they don't believe in. They don't know what they believe in. And that's what I very much feel with the Black Lives Matter people tearing down the statues. They only know what they're against.
Yeah, you can't define politics or your ideology as such negatively through only not this. You have to have something positive to it. You have to say, we want this thing. You can't say, well, we want everyone to be equal. Well, okay, how are you going to do that? Just equality. Yeah. But that's not how it works. You can't define it by get rid of the racists, get rid of this. This is bad. Not this, not this, not this. That if you constantly go negative, there is nothing to add.
Well, I think that's what you're seeing it evolve into, which is basically the left eating itself up because nothing is sacred, nothing is protected.
Yeah, you remember when Germaine Greer was the furthest left feminist there is, and now feminists decry her?
Yeah. Even people like her, I would say.
The Heritage Party's manifesto, didn't we?
Yeah, although I've just seen a comment here saying Black Lives Matter are nothing more than an anti-white Marxist terrorist organization.
Pretty hard to disagree.
It's hard to disagree with that.
But it's very clever optics naming themselves that sort of statement because of what happens now. As soon as you say, I disagree with BLM, you say, people think you say, I disagree that Black Lives Matter, which is not what people are saying. You're saying you disagree with the organization. Oh, but it's an idea, not an organization. No, it's not. Those two things can exist simultaneously. And you can disagree with one and not disagree with the other. I mean, how controversial do you want to go? Because there is, to this day, still no evidence that George Floyd's death was racially motivated.
Oh, no, I totally agree. And I'm happy to go into that territory. There was a famous actress or someone who said that this could be what he did could have been inspired by Israeli police tactics.
What?
Because the Israeli police, I've heard, do a similar thing with the foot on the neck.
Right.
And she got totally abused online and in the media for this. Because, sorry, Who was the blonde-haired politician who was seen to be the successor to Corbyn? She didn't get in the end.
Oh, bloody hell, what was her name?
It's so funny with the news cycle recently. We have so many of these fast-pacing stories that are just so ridiculous that you just forget the names involved. But she had like blonde hair, and she was very much the Corbynite and the future successor for the Corbynites. Obviously, that didn't pan out. And anyway, that's what she got in trouble with, because she actually retweeted, I think, someone who said this could have been inspired by Israeli police tactics. And this was immediately decided that this was anti-Semitic in some way. Rebecca Long Bailey, someone's just written down Rebecca Long Bailey. Yes, and I'm not entirely sure what's completely true in that, because I've seen articles about this, and they do quite fierce tactics like this, and it could be that she could be right. It could be just a technique, a police tactic that's been introduced.
Several police forces do use that as a technique.
We know that the American police force has been more militarized year after year.
I think there's definitely a big discussion in America to be had about that, about the overzealous and corruptness of certain police forces. But turning it into a race issue it's the same thing that's happened with the woman recently murdered by a police officer in the UK, or alleged. It's not proven yet that she was murdered by a police officer, but police officer being under investigation for it. I can't remember her name, which, considering it's been on the news pretty much every day for the past week, Sarah something.
Yeah.
And now you've got women saying, "Oh, we're afraid to go out." Well, guys go out and hold a key in certain neighborhoods as well, because they're violent neighborhoods. It's not so much a gendered issue.
You're talking about the Green member of the House of Lords who said there should be a curfew on men.
In her defense, she did say that as a response to someone who suggested that women should not go out after dark. Both ideas are ridiculous, frankly. What a lot of it is doing is abdicating personal responsibility.
Absolutely.
And what people aren't willing to acknowledge is that the majority of assault victims are men. The majority of suicides are men. And also the fact that the reason that the majority of rape victims are women and sexual assault victims are women is that a woman cannot still in the UK be convicted of rape.
Really?
Yep. Forced envelopment is not rape.
I did not know that.
It is only sexual assault.
Interesting.
Similarly, also another one is the majority of the homeless. 75% of homeless people are men.
That doesn't surprise me.
But society tends, I think, to view men as somewhat expendable.
Well, it's presumed that men are more sort of powerful and therefore should be able to look after themselves.
Yeah.
So I guess that's where that comes from.
It's a very... I think it's definitely a delicate discussion. I think a lot of people go into, and myself included, have gone into that sort of discussion very bullheaded, because it gets people worked up naturally. But there is a strong discussion to be there. As someone said, there was a petition to change the legal definition of rape, and Parliament rejected it. Similarly, when Jess Phillips laughs at talk about men's things during the Equalities Committee meetings.
Well, it always makes me laugh so much that we have a minister for women and equalities, but equality doesn't count for men. Apparently, it's only a women's issue.
Yeah, exactly. So, anyway, on to lighter subjects. Heritage Party Manifesto.
Heritage Party, saving our heritage, saving our culture, taking back our country.
So we'll start with the start of their manifesto. A manifesto for social conservatism to promote life, liberty, prosperity, and national sovereignty, as they say. For a nation to thrive, it must be connected to its roots. We, as the living generation, are responsible for looking after the heritage which has been passed to us from our forefathers, and we have a duty to pass it on to the generations which will come after us. This is the basis of social conservatism. Successive governments have eroded our freedom, giving away our sovereignty, and mismanaged our economy. The Heritage Party exists to return to the principles of social conservatism, to reverse the cultural destruction wreaked by politically correct ideologies, and to return to our true traditions and heritage. In embracing these principles, we believe the United Kingdom can once again become a great and prosperous nation. I think that's quite right, really. There.
Pretty reasonable.
It's my main critique of that is it's not really saying much, though.
It kind of reminds me of the is it the Constitution or the Declaration of Independence? The pursuit of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right?
Yeah.
I
don't. This is, I think, is sort of my issue with the whole manifesto in general, in that it says a lot of these things, but there doesn't seem to be much in way of literal policy.
Right.
Which, if I remember back to the last UKIP manifesto, well, the last one before I left at least, did actually have quite a bit of that.
Okay.
I like the idea of a lot of things, but it's all well and good saying, yes, we're proud of this, we want to do this, we want to do this, and then not saying how you're going to do it.
Yeah. I think that part of that may be because it's a new party.
Oh, obviously, yeah.
It's sort of still discovering itself, and so I'm sure as it develops, the policies will become more specific.
I guess that might be a good way for them to attract more people to them. They say, okay, if we were to get in power tomorrow, this is what we would do. I'm reading. You're just speaking to values and ideas.
Yeah, I think it's important to begin with to sort of state your values more broadly, and obviously then get more specific with policies. I'm reading here in the manifesto, it says the draconian coronavirus laws and regulations implemented for a disease no worse than a bad flu season are an egregious attack on our civil liberties. The Heritage Party opposes arbitrary restrictions on citizens and businesses, and will dismantle the legal framework which gives the government the powers to erode our liberty in this manner again. So,
yeah, that's in fact, there is not an opposition in Parliament really to the restrictions as it stands. It's something that the Labour Party really should be doing, but
well, they're long gone now, aren't they?
Dissidents. And I don't know. I'm not disagreeing with any of it either. I just saying yes, we want the restrictions to end. Okay, fine. That's closest you're getting to actually saying that's something we would do tomorrow if we got in power. Saying there's a line here: children should be taught British history in schools, both good and bad, but with a sense that on balance we are a nation with a history and heritage to be proud of. Fully agree with that. I'm not asking them to set out a full curriculum for the year either. That's a little bit too in depth. But at the same point, that I think gives a better sense of what is to be taught, what their aim is, and what they intend to do, how they intend to do it, rather than just saying we want to make kids proud of Britain again. Saying something like children need to be taught this in schools, both good and bad, and so forth. That gives it a lot more accuracy as to what they want.
Yeah. Someone's just put here the original declaration said life, liberty, and private property. I've never heard that before.
No, I've not either. But
I
know it went through several drafts before it went through, so it might have been one of the drafts.
that is something I'm very much in favour of. I think we do need to go back to this idea of an Englishman in his castle. I think that everyone needs to have a stake in society, and having a house is definitely a part of that.
As I said before we started this, I don't support democracy at this point. I think democracy is a failed idea. I genuinely think that feudalism and so forth is a lot better for the support of individual liberty.
Well, I guess in that sense, you're more of a radical than I am. But okay, let's develop this a little bit, because I do find this interesting. I always thought of you as quite a libertarian, but you've been very pro monarchy, and what you just said there about feudalism. How do you square those two together?
Smaller governments than this bloated autonomous body we have. Limiting government down to an individual who, whilst they in theory have the right to do a lot of draconian and tyrannical things, if they did that, it's a lot easier to turn around and say, no, we're not going to let you do that, than it is the entirety of the Westminster Parliament.
In a way, you're sort of even more old school heritage, because you want to go back to even before democracy in this country.
Well, I'm not against democracy for local management of things,
and
so forth, but for feudalism is not big government by definition, as someone's putting on there. Feudalism can vary. There's two types of feudalism. Early feudalism, which was of individuals, which then evolved into this group feudalism as such, where it wasn't just the king in charge, it was the king and the
aristocracy.
Well, not just the aristocracy as well. There was a whole group of, some were elected by various other barons, things like that, but generally the fewer people you have to make things accountable to, the easier it is to make it accountable. Democracy only works in small scales, I think, at least. Democracy, for example, it comes from ancient Greece, as everyone knows. The name itself, literally demos kratos, rule of the people. In classical Athens, democracy was done as direct democracy. You would have people going on to the Pnyx, which was a bit on the hill, where they would all vote, and literally it'd be a show of hands. It's actually where the phrase getting roped into something comes from. Because when a vote was needed to be done, they would drag a rope covered in paint across the market square. And you didn't want to get paint on your clothes because it was a nightmare to get out. And also, if it's stained, you sort of got noticed that you got marked as, I don't want to participate, I don't want to be involved in getting involved in our society. So people got literally roped in. But because it was such a small population, the Attic Peninsula probably had about 100,000 people at most at its peak. Maybe like a fair bit more, a bit later on, but that's when it was democratically run like that. Even then, you can really argue some of the aspects of democracy there, but when it was such a direct democracy, that's how it works. You had the Buratarion, which was people selected by lot to run an effective parliament. And they were selected by lot from all over the peninsula, from all different social classes, which was a lot fairer way of doing it when you think about it, because you didn't get career politicians if you're selected by lot. It became sort of a national service to do a year in the parliament, which would be an interesting way of running a society in the modern day, at least. But this is why I think, like I say, it works a lot better on a smaller scale, where people have a lot more of a stake and a lot more of a share of actually changing things.
Yeah, well, I actually really like the American system in the way that you have the electoral college, and that it's not just the popular vote. The rule mob rule deciding who becomes president. You actually have each state have an importance on what their opinion is. So just because there's millions and millions of people in New York or Los Angeles doesn't mean they get to dictate to Utah or Texas what to do. There's still some more autonomy there. And so my position, I guess, is more, well, I very much believe in democracy, but sort of more in, I guess it's more of a Roman structure of democracy.
You want to support a more federal system?
I guess so, yes.
It's the big difference between the EU and the US, in that the US is a federal system and the EU is a confederal system. In that, in the United States, smaller bodies allow the large powers to make laws over them. There is no, for example, official national drinking age in America. Just state subsidies or tax subsidies are given to certain states if you put it at 21, for example. But there is no national drinking age in America.
Yeah.
And simply this is why towns in America can make their own laws.
And that's what's great.
Federal system.
That's what's great
about the EU. It's the complete opposite.
That's what's great about America, in that you have choices. And I love, for instance, how in California you're seeing people get really pissed off with the tax regulation and things like that. And so you've got big names like Elon Musk and Joe Rogan saying, "Screw this, we're moving to Texas."
Yeah.
And Joe Rogan actually said something which I thought was really sort of profound and interesting in his interview with Elon Musk. I don't know if you saw it recently.
I haven't seen the recent one.
Anyway, you should watch it because it's really interesting. And Elon Musk is a big fan of Austin, Texas, which I've been to, and it's a great place. And it's sort of described as kind of like California within Texas, because it very much has that kind of hippie vibe and everything. Yeah. But Joe Rogan says that because it's surrounded by a good amount of God and guns, it's protected from this liberal craziness.
Brilliant.
And it's a weird thing that when you have cities, you know, they tend to lean more left-wing, liberal, crazy. But really, you sort of need that conservative structure for things not to become like, you know, Portland or somewhere like that.
Risk in our society a lot more, and what cities tend to do is make things, in a lot of ways, overly safe.
I mean, it's fair to say that London is lost now. I would say so anyway. Would you agree?
I think there's a chance to reclaim it.
Do you ever see it?
It's getting very close to me.
Do you ever see it?
Technically, now I work in London. I don't like.
Do you ever see a Conservative politician becoming mayor of London again? Because I certainly don't.
I could
really.
Well, I don't see Khan winning this time.
Really? Who do you see winning? You don't see Sean Bailey winning, do you?
I think he's got more chance than Khan. More on the same grounds of why Clinton lost the election to Trump. It wasn't people wanted to vote for Trump; they wanted not Clinton. And I think this election, people want not Khan.
Right. But surely the type of people who live in London, these people are they're unsavable. I know that there's.
I don't know. I hope there can be, at least. I think it's too early to tell anyway. But I think Khan has pissed off a lot of Londoners.
But
those who are big Labour supporters.
I'm obviously vehemently against a lot of what Khan said, including things I find ridiculous, such as banning adverts with people in bikinis on the underground and stuff like that. But I guess for me, I feel like the people of London are so far detached at this point that they probably love Khan. So
I should also probably point out, I'm talking about the first time Trump won, not the second time.
In what? Sorry, what? In referring to what?
When I was talking about Trump beating Hitler, I was talking about the first time Trump won, not when Trump won against Biden.
Oh, okay, I see.
Had it stolen against it.
So you think there could be a chance for Sean Bailey?
Oh, certainly. I think it's going to be a lot closer than people think. At least I hope it will be. But I can see it. Because I made a comment about, look at the Swiss, they voted to ban the burqa and enforced it. Again, that's actually something I disagree with. If people want to wear that, if their family, and I don't agree with them, people being controlled by their family and their local society, but they want to wear it. They have the option to not do so and the legal protection if they choose to not do so.
Yeah, I would agree with that as well, to be honest.
So I don't think we should ban certain items of clothing and so forth.
Well, although I have to say, I am compelled by the argument that you should be able to see your face in public.
Oh, so, I agree. Yeah, I think that there should be certain points of that saying, if you're, I can understand, for example, at petrol stations. Yeah, you need to see someone's face. Really, that's why they make you remove motorcycle helmets and so forth.
Yeah.
And this is Western society is built on the idea of seeing someone's face. It's built on that trust. So, yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'm not saying religious clothing should have special treatment in secular state. What I'm saying is that if they choose to wear it, they should be allowed to. But that just means then they won't be able to go into a bank. They can wear it if they want, but it's not going to be an exception to the rule of needing to see your face.
It's interesting how we see the situation develop in France, I think, in the last few years.
Yeah,
and how
where a teacher gets murdered in the street and that doesn't become national outrage.
Yeah, because we're very different.
I find that fascinating.
We're very different to France. France very much is much more. It's the state and the culture is very much linked together, and what we see happening with things like the burqa, they do sort of see it as a bit of an assault on their culture and their country and on their way of life. And so you're seeing a big friction now between the state and, the Islamic community.
Yeah.
And so it's going to be interesting to see how that develops.
Just to respond again to what Gazard saying there, that they are still allowed to go in a bank wearing the burqa. Yes, and I'm saying that they shouldn't be, but that doesn't mean the burqa should be banned outright. If you go into a bank, you should have to obey the rules going into that bank. If you want to wear the burqa going day-to-day life, do it. I don't really care. You know how the burqa actually came about? It wasn't actually a sign of dominance or anything. It was protection against sandstorms.
I thought it came about to stop men having their eyes swayed by
the original was sandstorms, because realistically, if you're in the middle of the desert or in that sort of area and it's sandstorming, you'll want to get your face covered.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Do you think that the state should have a stake in promoting culture?
I'm going to stop you there, because if you think if any questions asked, do you think the state should have? 90% of the time, my answer is going to be no.
Okay. Well, let me test that theory. Do you think the state should have some sort of a stake in promoting, British culture or something like that, in asserting some kind of British values?
If the state is to act, then it should do so with that in mind.
Okay, so I found the 10% then.
Yes or no, because there's a very big difference saying it should actively act to promote those things, and saying when it acts, it should promote those things.
Well, I guess the good thing about our system is we have the royal family, and they sort of promote British values by being who they are.
Put it this way, I know you disagree with him a lot, but Eric convinced me on the whole gay marriage argument of being against it, actually, on very specific grounds. And I've lost friends over this at this point, because they just say, oh, you're against gay marriage, you're a bigot. No, I don't give a shit who partners with who, whatever. I'm against gay marriage in the same way that I'm against the state being involved in marriage in the first place anyway. But if the state is to have a say on marriage, it should do so with an aim to promote the ideal environment into which to raise a child, which pretty objectively is a man and a woman. Because biology. Pretty objectively. That is the ideal. That is not saying that any homosexual, any other pairing or single parent cannot raise a child perfectly well. That is not to say that. But to change the legal definition of marriage defeats the objective of making it legislatively involved at all. So if you want to make gay marriage equal to heterosexual marriage, just get rid of state involvement in gay marriage.
Well, from the Christian perspective, marriage was created as an institution to create a good environment for a child to be brought up between a man and a woman. And I personally am against gay people being able to adopt children, because I don't believe that having two fathers is a natural or good environment for a child to be brought up. I know people may say, two fathers may, earn good money and be able to provide a nice environment. But I feel like as a child, it's very important to have, a male father figure and a female mother figure. I feel like that's a part of
I was still saying,
nature or God, depending on what your beliefs are.
Parent to raise a child well, but objectively best, easiest way to do it. Again, that's not saying it's that all heterosexually married couples are going to raise a child perfectly well, because very clearly they're not.
Of course not, no.
But statistically, it shows that it's better for the child.
Yeah, I've been becoming a Catholic. I'm in the process of becoming a Catholic, and the more I learn, the more I start to see that everything which I see, which is natural to me and makes sense for a society to be healthy, very much aligns with the Christian perspective and Catholic.
Of course, Western society is built on Judeo-Christian values.
Yes, and that it's so bizarre to me, because as I've grown up purely from an atheist family, I've had no experience of Christianity in my life until more recent years. Jordan Peterson was actually the first person to get me interested in Christianity. And I've seen the world around me go absolutely bonkers. And for me, I've not understood why. And being introduced to Jordan Peterson and then later other Christian people and Christian scholars, it's made me think that I understand now. It's because we've moved away from Christian values. And as Jordan Peterson says, we are living on the flames of Christian society. And as the ashes, of Christian society. And as those ashes start to go away, that's when you get, the attacks on the royal family, the tearing down of statues. In my belief, that's kind of what's playing out right now.
Can you hold the stream for a minute, or go through the comments whilst I just nip to the loo?
Of course.
I shall be back in a moment.
Okay. I guess I can talk a little bit about our next show. I know this is going on for quite long. We won't make a habit of making these episodes too long, because I know sometimes people don't really like them when they go on too long. But I have someone who I know someone who knows him very well, and he's someone who was an atheist, went around the world to find sort of spiritual meaning in life. He went to places like India and meditated with Buddhists, this kind of thing. And he was more of a left-wing person, and he actually ended up looking back to his own country and to Christianity and I believe he's a Catholic now. And he actually decided that there was a lot of spiritual enlightenment and meaning in our own culture, which is based on Christian values. And I'm very keen to get him on the show next week, probably on Saturday, again at a similar time. And hopefully he can tell us what he's learned and tell us something interesting about what he believes about Christianity, because I do think it's not talked about quite as much as it should be, because I'm just going on a rant about Christianity. Basically, I've just talked about a possible next guest, who's someone who went around the world looking for spiritual meaning, ended up turning back to Christianity, even though he was from an atheist background. So that should be an interesting one to have next week.
I've always found religion quite interesting, because at least until the past few years, I would have classed myself more as anti-theist than anything. But
I was very much into Christopher Hitchens, and I was of a similar vein.
The Christopher Hitchens, Richard Dawkins, God is Dead, God is a Delusion.
The Four Horsemen.
Yeah. And I think I've come a lot more. I don't think I've gone as far as you have in the sense of you've embraced a religion, but I've gone more to the. I've still classed myself as an atheist, but I appreciate the necessity of religion and the use it can have. What my issue becomes is with orthodoxy,
I think. What aspects of orthodoxy are you scared of the most?
Scared of, yes. No, in the same way that I don't like state control, I don't like there being a top-down power. So I disagree with any orthodoxy of a religion. If people want to believe something, that's their right to. The idea you have to practice this way, you have to do this, you have to do that. That's where I start having problems with it.
Well,
at the same point, the closest religion I would class myself as close to religious I would class myself being is close to Buddhist. Last year I read Tao Te Ching, sorry, which fascinating book. It was absolutely absurd in places.
Well, Buddhists don't actually believe in a god, so it's kind of like an atheist religion, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a non-theistic religion. And this is why I agree with a lot of what Christianity is saying. I just don't agree with the God aspect. I don't. To me, if there is a supreme deity that's controlled everything, then they are not worth my respect. If my future life matters so much on whether I worship them or not, they're very egoistic.
Mm.
If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. Fair enough. But to me, actually, the most convincing argument for religion is Pascal's wager.
What's the name of it again?
Pascal's wager.
Wager. What?
Which is, if there is a God, you should believe in him. If there isn't, well, you might as well believe in them just in case. Because if you don't, if there isn't a God and you believe in them anyway, and then nothing's going to happen. But if there is a God and you don't, bad things happen. That is the most logical argument I think I can think of to believe in a deity.
I kind of feel, again, I think this is what Jordan Peterson has said before, that it's kind of beneficial to act as if a god, even if there isn't a god. And I do believe there is a god, but I kind of feel that even if I didn't believe there was a god, it would be better to act as if there was a god.
I get the logic at the same point. I don't feel like I need to have the fear of being eternally judged to not be a dick.
But do you not feel that the average person, they kind of need God to, combat things like sexual immorality, and to live a life which isn't revolved around
as a coping mechanism, yeah.
Which isn't revolved around materialism. I remember, I think Nietzsche said that Christianity was a great way of disciplining the European mind to become a great civilization.
Again, that non-theistic religions can do the same.
Do you really think so?
Yeah, Buddhism is wholly about anti-materialism.
Yeah. Well, it's funny, actually. Russell Brand, was he into Buddhism? I know he eventually became Christian, but
I believe so.
Yeah, so he obviously got involved with Buddhism, but he eventually went to Christianity. Yeah, I don't have a big problem with Buddhism. I think there's a lot of good ideas in Buddhism, but Christianity speaks to me in much more of a bigger way.
Like the same one, I've always, since I say I've become a lot more atheist than anti-theist. In the past, I would have said, "Well, no, you're wrong. You're clearly an idiot for believing that." And I'm like, "Yeah, well, you believe that? Fair enough. It doesn't affect me. No problem." The same. I also do find it quite hilarious when Americans say, "Oh, we live in a Christian society." No, America is not a Christian society. The United Kingdom is a Christian society because we have the Church of fucking England, and it's tied into the state.
Well,
whereas in America there is a distinct separation between church.
A separation of church and state. Yeah, although being a soon-to-be Catholic, I would disagree that the Church of England is very Christian, especially now.
I mean, yeah, that's a whole separate question, a whole separate discussion. I think we should definitely try and do that one time.
Are you pro the separation of church and state while we're on the subject? Yeah, I would say I'm the same.
I say that, but then I'm immediately hesitating afterwards. Because I can understand the value system is ultimately going to be derived from a lot of religious ideals. At least historically it would have been.
Well, yeah.
It depends. I think it depends how the power dynamic goes. If the power dynamic goes from the church to the state, then I think there's more of an issue with the power, rather than the power dynamic going from the state to the church.
In the Catholic perspective, you should actually give respect to governmental authority because it believes that these people were put in charge. They were put in their place by God. And so it says you should pay your taxes and you should obey the law.
I wonder when that was all added in.
Well, this is I'm reading various things about Catholicism, and it says it in the Bible that you should respect the authority of the people in charge, and I do
a taxpayer, or taxman, sorry, but
yeah, and that has been a challenging thing to go along with, considering I've been quite anti-establishment, but I do understand that we shouldn't be totally anti-society, and I'm much more in favor of reforming society rather than totally trashing it.
Because it's saying a couple of things. In America, the states and church are not separate at all. When has the USA ever elected an atheist? Just because they haven't doesn't mean they can't. At the moment, we cannot have a non-Church of England monarch, for example, and there's nothing stopping them doing so. So they are separate, even if they're not in tradition. And also, do we both support that the church should pay back the money they've taken from the government, along with ending special legal treatment that they have? I wouldn't really care about them paying back money, because then you're going on the same argument as reparations from slavery or so forth. However, ending special legal exemptions for religious institutions, yes, I can agree with that. Churches should have to pay tax. And I do actually support there being religious leaders in the House of Lords from all major religions.
Okay. I feel like churches, I would disagree, and I think churches should not have to pay tax.
I think pubs shouldn't have to pay tax, but
Oh, of course, they're providing an integral service, which is serving beer. That's
exactly.
without question.
Here we are. Time for another.
Yeah, it's an interesting. I mean, I'm so used to arguing the arguments that I'm pretty certain of already. Free speech, low immigration, low taxes. I don't always go deep in discussion about these subjects, other than things I watch on YouTube, etc., and read books. But it is that interesting perspective of, having a Christian monarch or something like that versus a democratic society. And so
I think it's, especially with the idea of a Christian monarch, in that her religion informs a lot of her decisions, but doesn't rule them. In that sense,
could you say that there's actually a Christian monarchy, a monarchical Christian country currently, as there used to be, 100, 200 years ago? What country now is a Christian monarchy? As in not ruled by democracy, it's a Christian monarchy.
Again, technically Britain is, but
we're not ruled by the royal family, are we? We're ruled by Parliament.
No, we're technically ruled by the royal family, but it's delegated to Parliament.
I see what you mean. The Prime Minister is the chief advisor of the Queen. That's technically how it is, but also we're basically ruled by Parliament.
I don't think there are any actual. I suppose actually a couple of the African nations might be. Let's have a look. List of current monarchies. There we go. 44 monarchies. There's the Commonwealth realms. Fair enough. Principality of Andorra. Belgium.
But these are all democracies combined with monarchies.
Yeah. Fully democratic states. Yada, yada, yada. So yeah, we've got a lot of constitutional monarchies. But then if we look to the Middle East, we've got the Muslim monarchies, the Kingdom of Bahrain, the nation of Brunei, Malaysia, the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan, the state of Kuwait, the Kingdom of Morocco, the Sultanate of Oman, the state of Qatar, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates.
Yeah, see, they're proper monarchies. It's not ruled by democracy there.
Cambodia and Bhutan. They're all more ceremonial, though, I believe. Absolute monarchies remain in the nation of Brunei, the Sultanate of Oman, the state of Qatar, and in Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, and Saudi Arabia, sorry. Bahrain and Kuwait are classed as mixed. Jordan, Malaysia, Morocco, and the UAE are constitutional monarchies.
Does it say that they are very happy societies?
I don't know. There is a national happiness index, though, which I'm going to look up and see where these countries lie on this, because Bahrain, Brunei, Malaysia, Brunei, Oman, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia. Let's have a look. There is a national happiness index. Well, considering for Bhutan, there is a whole section on the Wikipedia article about the Global Happiness Index in Bhutan. I'm guessing no. I'm guessing that might have been meddled with.
Well, the problem I have with the happiness index is quite often countries like Denmark and Sweden come near the top, and yet they're the highest places for suicide.
I mean, those that are still alive are pretty happy, though.
Yeah, it's great if you're one of the happy ones.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It's not, because how do you quantify happiness? You can't. So, you know, I couldn't really say how that, but also, you know, this is what I say with feudalism is that it would have to be benevolent feudalism, which realistically isn't going to happen. Which is why democracy is a better alternative than tyrannical than I don't know, overbearing feudalism. To an extent, yeah, I think there's a decent amount either way, but it's very easy for a feudal or monarchical society to go south very quick. But but democracy, a tyrannical democracy, is just as bad.
Well, that's what we're discovering now, I guess.
Yeah, the problem is it's harder to get rid of.
Well, okay. Well, I think we've gone on for quite a long time now, almost 2 hours. So maybe we should call it a wrap. But yeah, next week we'll get the person I mentioned earlier on, and we can have a good old chin wag about our Christian heritage. You know, you never know. You might be persuaded to become a Catholic at the end of it.
I'm fully open to it. I will admit, the last time I was in church was a couple of years back, and I'd been drinking with a friend of mine in a pub on Christmas Eve. We had a little bit of a walk back through the fields to get back, and we passed through a churchyard on the way. So we left the pub about half 11. He said, "Oh, let's go to midnight mass." No, I don't really want to go. But because we were quite drunk, I said, there'll be free tea and biscuits, which, you know, drunk me just says tea and biscuits, definitely. So he leads us into this church, and we sit down in the front row. Okay, not my most comfortable place, but sure, I haven't caught fire yet, so it's a good start. And the midnight mass starts, and he falls asleep next to me in the front row. Needless to say, awkward. Managed to wake him up in time before anyone really. Well, the priest gave us a couple of glares, but I managed to wake him up. But the most disappointing thing was there was no tea and biscuits.
But a whole lot of Jesus.
It's just like I had to sit there for an hour whilst drunk.
Yeah.
For no tea and biscuits.
He wasn't even emblematic preacher like Ian Paisley or something like that.
No.
That would have been entertaining.
Yeah, if it was one of those very, very American style preachers, praise the Lord sort of thing, then yeah, maybe I would have been a bit more entertained. But the very slow, constant drawl of, and then we say praise to the Lord for this. It was just, Jesus Christ, it was
pun.
That wasn't even intentional.
Yeah. See, that's because Christianity is such a part of our culture that you said that. You didn't even know.
It's true. I'll say it is. Okay, by Zeus.
By Zeus. Okay. Let's call that a wrap and catch you next week. And hopefully we can have another interesting discussion.
All right. Well, I hope everyone enjoyed. Leave us some more comments and so forth.
Yeah, tell us what you'd like us to talk about next. Tell us any input, any feedback. We don't mind some negative feedback as long as it's constructive.
Tell it how it is.
Yeah. Okay. Farewell.
See you now.